Oh, there we go. Perfect. So our professional education session this morning is presented by one of our own Learn members, Janice Pierce. She is a certified financial planner, retirement income certified professional, and chartered retirement income planner. Lots of letters, Janice. It means lots of studying and lots of tests. Janice is the founder and CEO of Achieve Financial Partners. She develops practical frameworks for navigating complex financial situations, including involving behavioral, relational, and decision-making challenges. Drawing on her background in risk management, advising, portfolio management, and behavior-based system design, Janice brings a structured, client-centered approach to restoring stability and clarity in financially disrupted households. Janice is the creator of Train Your Money, an approach designed to break money management into small, sustainable steps that stick. Her experience supporting clients through financial stress, including gambling recovery, has shaped her focus on building simple systems that work in real life. Janice is going to be presenting this morning on financial caregiving and building guardrails that prevent financial crisis. So with that, Sherry, if you'll stop sharing, and Janice, welcome, and we look forward to your presentation.
All right, thank you. I apologize. I have some allergy. I think it was all that wind yesterday, so I'll do my best here too. Let me find my screen. There we go. Okay, can you see that?
We can.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, Dara, for that wonderful introduction. As she mentioned, my name is Janice Pierce, and many times when we think about caregiving, we think about things like transportation or housing, medical decisions, and sometimes most of the complexity in all of that has to do with finances. And that's not because people are careless or irresponsible. It's because finances can be complicated, and they can, the support structure or figuring that out can be difficult at times. So originally I had this title, I think some of you may have seen it, it had something to do with preventing financial chaos or something like that. And I thought that was probably a little heavy for this early in the morning. So I adjusted a little bit to talk more about how do we build these guardrails before we get to that point. Because yes, there can be some things that get complicated, but we're going to talk about what are the things that we can look at kind of broadly, really high level, if you're the caregiver for somebody, or if you are talking with people who are becoming the caregiver for somebody. Like Joanne, for me, this is not just professional, it's also personal. I'm the caregiver, as we'll talk about, a continuum later of light to very involved care. I'm a financial caregiver for several members of my family along that continuum. So it's personal for me, it's also professional, because this is what I do with clients every day, is help them navigate some of these life transitions. As Dara mentioned, and those who are in gambling recovery, that's been a lot of my work for the past few years, but also transitioning. Just whenever finances have to change and become different, what does that look like for people? And how can we create a framework around that? So today we're going to talk about some key financial caregiving levers and how they might shift over time, how we can maybe toggle them back and forth depending on what needs are. What are some practical financial guardrails that somebody could put in place pretty easily to reduce their stress, maybe reduce confusion and reduce risk? That's a lot of what we're talking about. Not only risk for the person being cared for, but also risk for the caregiver, because protecting both of them, time and money, is very important. And then last, we're going to talk about when additional support systems, tools, or resources may be needed as caregiving needs evolve. We're going to, hold on one second here. In the chat, I put a link there. So if you got this earlier, or if you want to download this, we're going to talk through a family study, a family story, and you can take notes on there, or it's kind of a framework you can use later if you're talking with somebody and thinking through some of these. situations. So when I, excuse me, I like these pictures because I think it gives us a good idea of I always picture somebody, the picture on the left of somebody standing at the beginning of a caregiving journey for somebody, the caregiver looking down that road and going, oh my gosh, this looks overwhelming. The road is twisty. It turns. We can't see the end of it. There are a lot of ups and downs and bumps, and we just don't really know where this road is going. And the same is true for the picture on the right. Same thing. We can't really see where the road ends. It also has a lot of twists and turns, and it goes around the mountain. But the difference is we have the guardrail in the picture on the right. Keeps us from going off the cliff if something happened. The picture on the left, sure, it might seem like not as much danger, but you get off onto one of those sides and you're going to get stuck and maybe not be able to get back on the path the way that you want to. So as we think about guardrails, think in those terms of we still have some latitude, right? We want to create things that are flexible. We want to have that space in the road to move back and forth, but we want that protection. And how do we create those protections for people? And this is how we're going to build some supports and systems that create that for us. So sometimes when I talk about financial guardrails for people, people think about, loss of control or restriction. But good guardrails are really about, sorry, excuse me. Good guardrails are not about taking over somebody's life. They're about providing that supportive care for somebody in their finances. Sometimes these protections are really light. They might just be looking over somebody's shoulder and checking in, making sure that their bills are getting paid, having reminders, having shared visibility, or a simple organization of bills and finances. Then as things progress, maybe that level needs to increase. So the guardrails really serve three purposes. They help protect by reducing confusion, risk, and maybe some preventable problems. They help preserve dignity, relationships, and appropriate independence for the person who's receiving the care. And they help families adjust gradually. Hopefully, if we build these correctly and build these with this in mind, that we can scale this up and down, they can gradually adjust as needed, either to more care, more oversight, or less as the situation demands. So as I mentioned, probably the easiest way to think about this is to put it in the context of a family. And Joanne, thank you so much for all of that great information. I had no idea how complex that was, because from my side, right here, like Mary has this dementia diagnosis, but I had no idea that all of that was as complicated as it was. So thank you for sharing that in-depth information. Really helps inform my work the more that I can learn from other people. So as we talk through this framework, we're going to talk about Mary. And Mary had a dementia diagnosis a few years ago. Now her daughters are beginning to notice subtle changes in her finances. She has unopened mail. She keeps buying the same things, even though she doesn't need them. Some of her bills are getting paid more than once, and maybe some of her bills are not getting paid at all. And when her daughters start to talk to her about this, she is having more and more trouble connecting in the conversation and understanding what they're talking about. Financial concepts that she used to understand, she's having trouble now and asking them to repeat what they're saying and help her understand it a little better. So the daughters got together and they started talking, and they realized that this wasn't just about the bills. This was about that road. They saw themselves at the beginning of this road, and how did they make a plan for things as they got more complex? What things could they put into place? They started talking about how much independence should their mom still have? What was she capable of? Versus how much oversight should they have into her finances? How are they going to talk about this? How are they going to all stay on the same page and communicate as a family? Who is going to take up what role? Who's going to do what tasks? how much support is needed, and what should they change now versus what could wait until later. So when we think about the financial guardrails, we're thinking in kind of these 4 areas. These aren't the only 4, this is really high level, but if you can kind of get an idea of what we're trying to adjust as we're looking at providing financial care for somebody, these will give you like that framework of how to at least create some of that safety and barriers as we go along. So we're looking at financial independence, financial oversight, automation. This is like how what bills do we automate? What can we pay automatically and have it just run? And then how do we communicate with the loved one that we're caring for, plus also the family at large? Like how are we going to manage this? So on the left, we have a person in this slide. We have a person who's completely independent. They don't need any oversight. They may choose or not choose to have automation, but they don't need it. So let's say this is Mary when she was at her healthiest, and she was doing everything on her own. She didn't need anybody's help. She balanced her checkbook. She met with her financial professionals. She was on top of everything. She didn't need to talk to somebody about that because she had it all handled herself. So now, as we get to where we are today, where the daughters are seeing some of these things happen in her finances, they are starting to wonder, where do we step in? What can we do? And how much independence should we still leave mom? And what can she handle? So they decided that her independence, they wanted her to be as financially independent as possible. And they felt like if they automated the bills to make sure that her mortgage was paid, the utilities were paid, her cell phone stayed on, maybe even providing a meal plan service for her, that she could still live independently, and all of her needs would be taken care of. It would be minimal tasks for the daughters. Then they could increase their oversight into her bank accounts, her investment accounts potentially, and just make sure that everything's running the way it was, or that it should be, and that she's taken care of. So the daughters talked to their mom, were able to help her understand what they were doing. Mary agreed that she would like to not have to worry about paying her bills manually, writing out checks, mailing the envelopes, or learning how to do it online. So she was happy about the automation. They set that up and things kept going. So as you can see, a little bit of independence was shifted away to her daughters, who are becoming more of the caregivers. But they've also created some efficiencies that, using some tools that they have that are making things simpler for everybody. So this is the support continuum I was talking about. And as I mentioned, in my family, I have all 3 of these. I'm in all 3 of these categories. Right now with Mary and her daughters, they're kind of in the light touch. They're thinking, okay, maybe somewhere between light touch and more structure, where they're saying, we're going to oversee her accounts. We're going to make sure that the bills get paid. We're going to make sure if, premiums go up or the electricity bill goes up, that we're aware of that and we can adjust for that. And then they're going to check in. And they've decided once a month, check in with their mom, see how things are going, see if they're noticing any changes, maybe checking in with her financial professionals if she wants them to do that, if she's given them permission to do that. They've also kind of veered into number 2, more structures, because now they're auto-paying her key bills. They're getting spending alerts sent to them. And maybe they've started putting themselves on her accounts as trusted contacts. That way, if something happens, then they would be notified. this is, when we were talking about risk, this is a great way to protect somebody from fraud, mismanagement, theft, as they need more and more care. Okay, so now we're going to fast forward a little bit, and as Mary's care needed increasing, the daughters decided that they were going to move her out of state closer to one of the daughters to live with her. And so this is probably, I don't know, a few months to a year down the road. They've put those light guardrails in place that we talked about. Well, now we're kind of to another bend in that road where they're realizing their mom needs full-time care. One of the daughters has decided that she will do the physical care for her, but this creates a whole other set of financial challenges now. They need to sell Mary's home, which will create some equity that then they need to decide where that equity is going to go. Does she have a bank account, a brokerage account? Where do they want that money to sit? What is that money going to be used for? And how are we going to access that money for her care? What does all of that look like? And also could be then we're coordinating a lot of finances across states now. If she sells her house, they'll need to cancel her insurance potentially. Maybe she doesn't drive anymore, so there'll be some insurance work that needs to be done. Maybe her estate plan needs to be updated. Maybe her taxes are going to change, right? So all of these things kind of start to come into play as we're looking at the next level of care. So the daughters are thinking, okay, how do we simplify this for ourselves while giving mom the support that she needs? The one daughter will provide the physical support, physical care day to day. And the other daughter then has said, okay, well, I'll take care of the finances. I'll monitor the accounts. I'll make sure that all of these transfers happen, make sure her taxes get done, all of those things on that side. So that's how they decided to divide it up. And then they started into what we would say probably is now moving more from level 2 to level 3, this active coordination. Because if you remember, they're still grappling with how do we give mom her independence as much as she's capable of. They've decided that they're going to give her a prepaid spending card so that she can still buy her groceries if she wants, buy her clothes, and kind of the things that she wants and feel like she's still spending money. They've decided that the equity from her home will go into an account and there'll be a set income stream that comes out. Think like a pension or like a Social Security check. It's the same amount every single month. Makes it really easy to budget for her needs. And then, there may be some other complications coming. If she would qualify for Medicaid someday, then all of those records are very important to have. So they're thinking long-term, like, what would this look like if mom later needs to go into assisted living or a nursing facility? Maybe they decide they need a daily money manager, somebody who actually will take care of the bills and pay them. They could have decided this at the beginning. Maybe they've decided that now's the time that they want that. And so they put that into place, or they designate one of the daughters to pay the bills. So now, as we look at our adjustable guardrails, we've moved, as you can see, Mary's independence is still adequate for what she's capable of. They've given her the autonomy to buy the things that she can buy. They're giving her the support of, taking her to her doctor's appointments, living with her daughter, having that 24/7 care and family around. But her independence of living on her own is decreased, which is why our toggle is over, to more to the caregiver participation side. The oversight, the daughters now mostly have control of her finances. They are the trusted contacts on her accounts. Maybe they've taken over her accounts, or maybe they are joint on her accounts now so that they can pay all of her bills. Maybe they've closed her accounts and have transferred money. There are a lot of ways to do this, but the oversight has gone mostly to the caregiver participation, and Mary doesn't have much to do with her own finances anymore. The daughters have kept the same level of automation. They like that. That seems to be working for them. Then with our communication, we see that the daughters are more talking among themselves than with Mary. They find that when they have conversations about finances that are too complicated, that their mom gets a little agitated and upset. And so now that she doesn't need to care for any of these things or take care of these things for herself, the daughters are the ones that are discussing the money management and finances and deciding how they should be paying the bills and caring for their mom. So this slide just gives us some overall practical guardrail first steps that we can take in these different areas. Up till now, we've kind of talked about the bigger framework, but at this point, a lot of families will ask me, okay, what does it actually look like in real life? How do we implement this? Not every family needs any one of these. That's why we talk about that road where there's some latitude back and forth, right? Like what might be good for one family is not going to work for another family. So a lot of this can be very individualized depending on what the needs are. For the visibility and oversight, though, it's kind of the first light step that we talked about is being able to see what's going on, knowing the information, knowing that somebody isn't being taken advantage of, knowing that their money is going where it should go. And this can be things like getting alerts. If there's a low balance or a large transaction that happens, you can use online tools. I'll talk about some of these later, some of the tools that we can use. For cash flow, sometimes that is about putting money in buckets where household bills are paid maybe automatically. There's a small spending account that's on a prepaid spending card for the person to be able to have some walking around money. And that's limited then. And then all of their other assets and finances are managed so that they're taken care of and kind of put in these boundaries. For family communication, this is one that varies, and just, for families, sometimes we got to try a few different things to see what's going to work. The shared calendar seems to be a good place to start for a lot of people. In the work that I do with people in gambling recovery, one of the things we suggest is a family meeting. And this is short family meeting, usually around a pay cycle. So when we're talking about that, but this could work in this situation too. The daughters get together, I don't know, every Friday night or Saturday morning for 15 minutes over Zoom. And they talk about a few things like how much money is coming in, what bills need to be paid. Is there anything else we need to take care of for mom? One daughter can say, how's she doing? Are you okay? And then, have that meeting, move on, but have it in a regular cycle so that nothing falls through the cracks. Having an emergency contact chain, like a phone tree, is a really good idea too, especially in a blended family or a family that lives, geographically diverse, like they're all over the place. Who's going to call? Who's going to make sure that everybody's informed if something happens? Then the last thing here, practical thing you can do is document things. Little shout out to my data diary. I love it. Dara, thank you. Puts everything in one place. You have it at your fingertips. Anywhere you go, all of that information is there. That's a huge piece of reducing stress for the caregivers and sometimes for the person who is receiving the care, because you can show up somewhere, at the broker, at your bank or wherever, and you have everything that you need. Putting trusted contacts on accounts, or even transfer on death or payable on death, if you're to that point where the accounts then can flow easily from one person to another. And then knowing where documents are stored. One big one is passwords, making sure you know where passwords, where you could find passwords or somebody's will, their trust documents, whatever that looks like. So these are, again, this is kind of a smorgasbord, like pick the one that's going to work for the situation that you're in to begin with, and then move on from there. The other piece of this is making sure to have the right support system in place and to start building that early. If you're at the beginning of that road of caregiving, then looking around at the finances and saying, okay, what do we have? if you bank accounts would be probably number one. Taxes, of course, are huge. Some estate planning documents, investment documents, whatever accounts the person that you're providing care for has, those would be the places I would start. Does the person, or do you have an accountant? Do you have a financial planner if you need one? Do you have or do you need a daily money manager? These are the people to start getting on the team as you're building out these financial guardrails. And so in the case of Mary and her daughters, one of the other things we would look at if we're building some financial guardrails for this family would be family support. Can we build into the budget some support for the daughter who is providing the day-to-day care? Can we pay for respite care for her on a continuous basis? And build that in so that it's already paid for. We already know it's coming out of the budget. And so there's no stress, there's no confusion, there's no discussion, it's just there. Also, any type of emotional care that the family might need. That should be a line item somewhere in the spending plan. Kind of talked about the financial and legal. Those are probably the most obvious, but if you are a caregiver for somebody, start getting to know those people. Ask if you can be invited to the meetings. Go to a financial planning meeting with your parents if you're going to be the caregiver for them. Make sure their estate plan is in order. Sometimes those can be difficult conversations, and so having them with a professional is sometimes easier than trying to have them on your own. And then, of course, one of the big pieces is care coordination. This can be medical care, housing care, like we were talking about if someone's going towards a Medicaid support, how do we coordinate all of that? All of those things take time. And so looking at who do you need on your bench? Who do you need on your team as you're building this is a really important place to start. All right, last, we will talk a little bit about guardrails, and I really want to leave it open for some questions and your thoughts and things. So as you're thinking through Mary and her family, if you have another situation and have some insight and things that you've used, this is a wonderful group to be able to be part of that team that we were talking about. And there's so many resources here in the Treasure Valley through Learn to access some of these things that will be needed. Here are some, this is just a sample of some tools that are out there, some technology that's out there that could be leveraged or used in this. By no means are these the only ones. I use all of these. And so I put them on the slide. I don't get paid for any of this. I'm just telling you that these tools work. So the first one is TrueLink. If you haven't heard of them, they have a debit card that is specifically built for caregivers. And the way it works is the person who is the caregiver signs up for the account, creates the username and password, and then the beauty of this card is you can toggle on and off where money can be spent. So, for example, if you have somebody who maybe takes money out of the ATM, cash out of the ATM, and you can't track it, you have no idea where it's going, you don't know if they're giving it to somebody they shouldn't, maybe they're spending it, maybe they're losing it, we don't know. This can be a good way. You just toggle that off. The card won't work to take money out or to take cash out, get cash back. Or if you just want them to use it at certain places, you can do that. So it's a great tool for that. And then you can load it with however much money you want on it. And so it's another way to create that income stream that's exact and to put the guardrails around spending. Monarch Money, if you're not familiar with it, or if you are, it's a budgeting app that aggregates all of the accounts. So this is a great visibility tool because you can see everything here. If you link the accounts, you can link everything from bank accounts, investment accounts, credit cards, any kind of assets. They can all go into Monarch, and then one person can look over everything. Where is money being spent? What bills need to be paid? If you haven't automated them, or have they come out? Are they accurate? With a kind of a one view over everything. And the other thing Monarch just built in is a credit view. So here now you can link credit and look at that. We haven't really talked about that, but that's another guardrail to put in place, either freezing somebody's credit or monitoring somebody's credit. That's one of the highest identity theft and fraud tools that's used by people, is stealing their credit and using it. So if people are in a position where they're not paying taxes, for example, those can be flagged for fraudsters to start then using their social security numbers and their credit, thinking that they've passed away when maybe they have or they haven't. And so Monarch is a great way to monitor kind of all of that from a high level. My data diary, a great way to collect information, keep all of those documents, have them in one place, gives you a lot of peace of mind. And then EverSafe is kind of like LifeLock, but it also was created for caregivers, and it monitors the dark web, it monitors credit, and it's a good tool to kind of overlay everything and protect from that fraud and exploitation that might be happening. Okay, so last, and this kind of goes into our notes about Mary, if anybody's been jotting things down or other thoughts that you have. As you're looking at that caregiving journey, if you're in the beginning of that and maybe that overwhelmed stage, I know I've been there, and when either the beginning of the journey or when something changes, because things can happen overnight, as you know. So taking a minute to think, what do we already have in place that's working for us as a family? Where are our pain points? Like, so what if we were to fix one thing first, what would that be? Which of our levers feels out of balance? And this also plays into communication, because the lever may feel out of place to one person and not to the other. And we get that a lot of that conversation around independence, right? How much independence does one person want versus what are they capable of? So that's another good conversation to have with a professional of it's some level, whoever that might be, counselor, attorney, financial planner, whatever the context is. And then, let's take this step by step. If I had one guardrail that I had to put into place today or this month as a caregiver, what would that be? Where's the easiest place to start? Or if you see yourself maybe down the road having to take over the care for somebody's finances, start having those conversations now with them about, hey mom, what do you think if I, just looked over your bank account once a month and made sure that everything was getting paid, or hey mom, what if we decided to get you a smartwatch on your phone plan so that, if something happened, then it would alert. Things like that can kind of soften and help move down the road, maybe in an easier way than waiting until some crisis happens and having to adjust abruptly, and taking over things and reducing that independence for people. So I guess the one thing to keep in mind is caregiving can be overwhelming. Again, we want to avoid or reduce that financial chaos if possible. But the guardrails aren't built in a day. This is something that takes time, thinking about how you built your own financial structure over your life. Taking it one piece at a time, starting with what is needed today, and then adding it piece by piece is the best way to build these. So I would love to hear from all of you. Any questions, discussion, conversations? Like, let's start this conversation and tell me where you're at. I always learn so much from all of you as well. So I'll stop sharing here and then, okay.
So I'll start with one that you and I've talked a little bit about in the past, Janice, but oftentimes the hardest part is to start this conversation. And if you have agreement as a family unit or a caregiving unit that you need to have the conversation, the guardrails and the levers are a great tool, right? Where are we? Where do we need to be? But how do you start the conversation? Do you have any suggestions of how a concerned loved one, a concerned caregiver, engages that conversation with the person they're worried about? with dignity and respect.
Yeah.
And how do you suggest your clients do that?
Yeah, and that is kind of the $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
I've approached it in different ways. One thing that I found, and this is just from my personal experience, I'll share this one first. Being a caregiver for those three people among on the continuum is sometimes finding somebody who's not going to be the caregiver to help have that conversation. So in one case, it was a friend of one of my family members who was able to say, hey, you know what? I think that I see this happening. And they heard that from that person because they've been friends for so long versus hearing it from me. So that's kind of my personal experience with that. From more of the client standpoint, when I'm talking to clients, I would say first of all, speak their language. Like you're saying, approach it with love and respect, of course. But if your person has, let's just say, we'll take Mary for example. Let's say that she was a high professional at one point, right? And so to her now that she's frustrated because she's losing some of what she thought she should be able to do, and maybe adjusting that to be giving her other things to do. So some of the things that I talk about is, okay, I may be, or your loved one may be overseeing this piece of your finances. What else would you like to do that's more comfortable? Or what can we do to still make them feel a part of the family, still make them feel valued, still make them feel like they're, have some worth, even though the finances may be shifting.
I love those answers. And I think engaging a professional often really helps, right? Because it's not the
Yeah.
caregiver making the assertion or accusation. It often feels like an accusation to the person who may need support. But I'm going to now flip the table and say, okay, now maybe your client is the caregiver, and I call it the reluctant caregiver syndrome or the ostrich syndrome. Like they
Yeah.
don't want to see what is happening with their loved one because it represents acknowledgments of fear and potentially additional work that they don't know how to support. Like, how do you get past that conversation with the reluctant caregiver, and what supports can be offered to them so that they don't feel like it's a burden they have to carry alone?
Yeah, that is huge, especially if you're the only person. If you don't have a family network and you're it, you're that reluctant caregiver who the buck stops with you. Like there is nobody else. Um, I mean, number one, I think having resources like Learn, like having a group of people that you can reach out to and get some of this information. Many times the professional, excuse me, whether it's an attorney, investment professional, banker, or financial planner, might be the first person to notice this anyway. And so then they're the ones trying to draw in somebody to get support in the family. And that's a very difficult place to be. And I would say, at least if somebody came to me, part of that would be, okay, so now we want as much automation visibility as we can get so that it reduces as much of that burden as possible. And of course, that's helpful if there are more assets, right? Because we can pay for daily money manager, an investment professional, an attorney, all of that. But let's say we're headed towards a spend down for Medicaid, right? That's going to look like a different strategy. But also we can build in a lot of those things and take off the plate of the reluctant caregiver. What I would say, and I really apologize, would be engaging a professional like a financial planner who will look at all of that overall steps and put it into place for them.
Yeah, and I think the emerging capabilities around automation and I think will deliver great support when used effectively for caregivers.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned earlier in the meeting, Tina has created an AI for caregivers. And it's like when that burden it feels so overwhelming, it's important that we point them to tools like that so they can figure out how to make other things in their life potentially more efficient and effective, so they can pick up some of the things that feel overwhelming and like they can't possibly pick up one other thing. But it's a real challenge because you get both the person who doesn't want to admit they need help and the caregiver who may be that reluctant caregiver because they just can't feel like they could take on one more thing. And it's a real challenge for families to navigate that.
It is. And one thing I think that helps if you're not the only caregiver, like if you can solicit help somewhere, whether family members or friends sometimes will step in, is to divide up the tasks. If you can have one person, so for example, one of my family members, I'm the guardian for, and my sister is as well. So we've kind of divided up. She does all the phone calls and the paperwork stuff. I do the finances and, take her to appointments and things like that. So sometimes if you can find that balance too, that's helpful. Still feels like a part-time job sometimes, but
Yeah.
you know, uh, uh, finding as many resources as you can and starting early. Like if you're a child and you see this coming for one of your parents potentially, like start putting some of these things in place if you can as soon as possible.
Well, I didn't intend to make the Q&A an interview, but thank you. And it was fun chatting about these things. We share a lot of the same ideas and trying to solve the same problems. So I appreciate what you do and how you approach it.